there was so much irony because the tech companies funded all these outside groups that said our free speech is threatened. And then those tech companies went and censored, right? They did the thing they said that the ISPs would do, right?
Yeah.
So I think there was an awakening for a lot of conservatives when it came to the censorship issue, right? It was kind of their opening to government, to market power, because for most of, certainly our lifetimes, maybe my lifetime more than yours, going back to the 80s, right? The conservative movement was about reducing the size of government. It was about government power as the biggest threat to liberty. That was the threat. And corporate power as a threat to liberty was not really something that the right was motivated by. There was some populist stuff in the Tea Party about Wall Street and the bailouts, but it wasn't really a speech issue. So I think that was kind of the gateway for a lot of conservatives when people's accounts started just disappearing, when accounts were getting throttled, shadow banned, when the Parler app was removed from the app stores and had their cloud services cut off by AWS. I think that was kind of the moment when people realized, well, wait a second, you can really just eliminate someone from the internet.
Howdy, everyone, and welcome back to Moment of Truth, the podcast of American Moment. My name is Nick Solheim. I'm the CEO of American Moment, and I'm very glad to have you back with us this week. We were delighted to have a good friend, Evan Swarztrauber from the Foundation for American Innovation join us this week. We talked about all things big tech and antitrust, why Republicans have changed their minds on big tech over the last couple of years. We talked about being from the island of Manhattan, as well as some very interesting stuff from the net neutrality days. I hope some of you are old enough to actually remember that back in the day, that leftist freak out. But Evan has been a great friend of American Moment. He also does this really great podcast called The Dynamist. This podcast is going to be cross-posted over there as well. I'd highly recommend that you go and check that out to stay updated on all the interesting things going on in tech and antitrust world. It's been a really great resource to us here at American Moment. So I'd highly recommend that you check it out. We will go now to Evan Swarztrauber. Evan, thanks so much for coming on Moment of Truth.
Thank you so much for having me.
So the way that we start the show, we ask about everybody's background, how they ended up where they are today. I think you're going to say some things that are going to shock some people. So why don't we start there?
I'm not sure my origin.
Start with where you're from first and do all that stuff.
I'm not sure my origin story will be as great as some of your prior guests, but I'll try to live up to that bar. I'm originally from New York City, which makes perfect sense. Bastion of conservatism that it is.
Where from in New York City? Like actually
in Manhattan. It's an island among several other.
You are actually from Manhattan.
Yes, from the island.
I don't know if I've ever met anybody that's just like from Manhattan.
Yeah, the locals call it the island.
It sounds made up. Sounds made up.
So from there, then went to college here down in DC, and basically have been here since then.
Why did you do that?
I could ask you the same question. Why did you come here?
I didn't come from the island of Manhattan to a much worse city, Washington, D.C.
That is a great question, actually. No, I did 1 year after college trying to work in New York state politics, and that was about all I needed.
That sounds horrible.
Right, it was terrible, and it convinced me that was not a viable or good idea to pursue that career path. So decided to give DC a shot. Maybe a less bad version of politics here than in New York.
Wait a minute. So sorry, I'm gonna get so distracted by this from the island Manhattan thing. How old were you on 9/11?
I was 10.
So
I was 9.
Dang, actually, you're
really
younger
tough.
than I thought you were.
The math is difficult.
Well, tell us what you remember. Again, I've never met anybody from the island of
That's
Manhattan.
like the classic question. It's like become a meme. I was in 5th grade. I was in class, and at one point during the day, it was clear that they were just kind of not doing normal school because everyone was like, what is happening? The principal came on for the first tower getting hit and said, like, there's been a plane that flew into the like World Trade Center, and everyone assumed it was somehow like a freak accident, something terrible. Then when he came on and said the second one, I mean, obviously we were in 5th grade. We didn't fully understand the implications, but I think even we were like,
you
well,
weren't like, the Saudis.
yeah,
you know?
no, but we were like, that doesn't seem like
Yeah.
2 accidents. And then just because it's New York City, like one by one, most of the kids in the neighborhood, most of the kids at the school rather, were walking distance from school because it was a local Catholic school. But some kids, of course, needed to be picked up by a parent driving or had to, somehow figure something out because they closed the subways and everything. But just one by one, our parents all kind of walked to school and picked us up. And so that
Wow.
was, kids don't really know what's going on. We didn't really understand the tragedy. So we just started playing a game of like, who's going to get picked up when, just to like distract ourselves.
Wow.
Like, oh, who's going to be next? And then obviously you get home, you turn on the news and you're like, wow. But that's what I remember.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I do actually remember 9/11. I was 5. I was 5. But I was in Minnesota. I was far away from all of that. Very interesting. Yankees fan,
Yes.
you said?
Which I knew this is already off to a terrible
We're
start.
totally off topic. We're gonna get there. They're playing really poorly right now, by the way. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but okay, so you move from the island of Manhattan. I'm sorry, I just can't let that go. Into DC, start working in politics here. What happens?
Yeah, so and just to continue the theme of starting this interview poorly, I started my career in DC at a libertarian think tank.
Which one?
It's called Tech Freedom.
Oh yeah, those guys.
Yeah,
we don't like those guys.
I've still got a soft spot.
Okay.
That's how I started. But that's where I started. And then I went over to the FCC during the first Trump administration. So now Chairman Brendan Carr, when he was a commissioner way back in 2017, he brought me on to help him with public affairs and helping to communicate his agenda as a backbench Republican commissioner.
And that was your second job?
In DC,
was getting to go do that?
Yeah, which was amazing. I mean, it was an incredible opportunity. It's how everything that came after was possible because of that experience.
He's a really good man.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
We're the FCC and everyone's lucky to have him. And then I had the privilege of working for the chairman under the first Trump administration. That's Ajit Pai, also an incredible guy.
Yeah.
So that was kind of
never met him. I would really like to.
He's awesome. I mean, I got to be careful about which, if I say nicer things about each one, they're very competitive.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, but
I'm sure.
Both amazing opportunities. Learned so much about tech and telecom policy.
Yeah. This was not one of the things that, we discussed that we were going to talk about, but the net neutrality thing is just such that is, the alarmism from the left on that is like so hilarious in retrospect. Can you give like the 30,000 foot view of like what happened and why they were wrong?
Yeah, I'll give you some fun facts about that as well. So I joined the FCC 1 week prior to the vote that was going to kill the internet. So it was like,
and you were in public affairs.
Yes, exactly. Right. And
rocks.
my boss wasn't the main target, right? Most of the ire and unfortunately death threats and horrible things were directed at the chairman, but all the commissioners, even the Democrats, got some crossfire because people out there didn't know who's who and they think this whole agency is terrible. And it was madness. I mean, the first open meeting is when they vote on these things that I join as a staffer is the big one. And someone called a bomb threat into the building. We had to clear the room. Then we came back, sometime later when they realized it was fake. And there were protesters for the entire week leading up to the vote. So when I would be walking from the metro to the building, there would just be all these protesters saying the world was going to end. So it was a pretty insane environment over an issue that did not matter at all. Like just the relationship between the outrage and the actual substance. I've never seen a gap larger in DC or any policy anywhere in the world between what was actually happening and how it was being portrayed. It was like a legal arcane debate about how to classify broadband under which section of the Communications Act. Like could not be more boring on paper. And it was pandemonium. But the fun.
So what was it actually?
What was the actual debate?
Yes.
Oh yeah. It was really just like how to regulate broadband. Should we regulate it as a common carrier like the telephone network? Or should we regulate it under a lighter touch approach, like an information service?
Yeah.
And there's some ironies there, right? A lot of the criticism from the left was that, but for regulation, internet service providers would censor people based on their politics. The irony, of course, is that
they would then later do that.
exactly right.
Yeah.
So it's such a weird time to think all these arguments that didn't really age well. But one of the fun things was that I immediately started getting attacked by internet trolls my second week of work, because I was tweeting like, it's great that we're doing this, and then just absolute vitriol. But one of them, someone used an expletive to comment on the size of my forehead, so that was fun. Just, you have a huge effing forehead. And
fact check.
Right, ever since, like every once in a while, I'll look in the mirror and remember that tweet. So it really stuck with me.
You should make that tweet like your Twitter header or something.
Yeah, there's an even better one, but I can't share it. It's not safe for this family show. But I got some fun, some fun criticism.
And what was it exactly that? Because I remember at the time seeing things like, you're gonna have to pay 10 cents per megabit or like whatever. Like, just how crazy was the outcomes that they were. And I think it's really important to hammer this home because it shows how ridiculous these people are. Like, they have no, basis in reality. Like, what were some of the craziest things that they were saying was going to happen that turned out to be untrue?
Oh man, I mean, it's hard to even know where to begin with that. There's been some great work kind of documenting that. If you know Drew Holden at American Compass, he's
great.
At the time, he was working just in public affairs somewhere, and he just would do these giant threads talking about media hysteria, which is how I found him, how a lot of people found him in DC.
That was how I found him.
And he has some of the best ones on net neutrality. So I would definitely check that out if you're interested. But some of them were, every time you would have to Google search, you'd have to pay $2. The ISPs would basically go to a startup and do like mafia style thing where they'd say like, it would be a shame if your internet stopped working unless you pay us like extra. Yeah. Just like crazy stuff. Like, can you imagine just like the AT&T guy, like doing like a racketeering thing?
Yeah.
Like,
meeting you in the alley with a lead pipe,
exactly. like the digital equivalent.
I'm gonna bust your kneecaps, buddy.
So there would be no startups anymore because they wouldn't pay the troll toll.
Yeah.
And that ISPs would censor websites based on the like political beliefs of the CEO, right? He would just like wake up and say, I don't like this website.
Delete
Cut it off. Yeah. Which again happened later, but different companies who did that. We'll get to that. So just insane stuff. You won't be able to look up. I was on a debate one time on this topic, and someone that I was debating with, unfortunately, had like a family member who had cancer, like a horrendous thing. And they said they're worried that the ISP will stop them from looking up cancer treatments. And I was just like, what? Like, why would they do that?
Yeah.
So I don't know, just some of the predictions went so haywire, and it's amazing to look back on it.
And all of these people surely lost their jobs for saying that, right?
There was, you would be hard pressed to find anyone who engaged in the hyperbole to then say, oh, maybe we took it too far. Like that, that was rare. What you saw was people maybe apologizing for some of the death threats and the temperature.
We're sorry we threatened to kill you.
Yeah, exactly. But or that we fomented that environment that enabled people to behave in such a way. None of the media articles that said, there's a famous one on CNN. It was the homepage of CNN, the end of the internet as we know it. To my knowledge, that article has never been updated.
Oh my God.
So we all just kind of needed to move on, I guess.
Yeah.
Just pretend that.
We're just going to forget about that.
Go down the old memory hole.
Well, it strikes me that like right about that time is when some, and I say some because it definitely wasn't most or all, but some conservatives really started taking big tech, the threat of big tech, seriously. What drove a lot of that initially?
Yeah, it's really interesting because so much of the net neutrality debate was about free speech, right? It was this risk to free speech if we don't have this regulation of the internet. And the tech companies were pushing a lot of that narrative, right? Because Google didn't want to have to pay extra to Verizon or something to carry their traffic, right? This was really a business to business debate that got morphed into this bigger thing. But there was so much irony because the tech companies funded all these outside groups that said our free speech is threatened. And then those tech companies went and censored, right? They did the thing they said that the
The other
ISPs
side
would
we're
do,
gonna
right?
do. Yeah.
So I think there was an awakening for a lot of conservatives when it came to the censorship issue, right? It was kind of their opening to government, to market power, because for most of certainly our lifetimes, maybe my lifetime more than yours, going back to the 80s, right? The conservative movement was about reducing the size of government. It was about government power as the biggest threat to liberty. That was the threat. And corporate power as a threat to liberty was not really something that the right was motivated by. Yeah, there was some populist stuff in the Tea Party about Wall Street and the bailouts, but it wasn't really a speech issue. So I think that was kind of the gateway for a lot of conservatives when people's accounts started just disappearing, when accounts were getting throttled, shadow banned, when the Parler app was removed from the app stores and had their cloud services cut off by AWS. I think that was kind of the moment when people realized, well, wait a second, you can really just eliminate someone from the internet, as Gail Slater has said, right? She's the current DOJ Antitrust AG. She said it's very easy to disappear someone from the internet when it's concentrated in the hands of a handful of companies, when they control
Right.
most of information flows. And I think that's what woke a lot of people up to corporate power. And then after that, you start asking, well, what else have I been getting wrong about these companies? Their record on privacy, their record on children's online safety, other anti-competitive problems. That was kind of the gateway drug was censorship.
What was the relationship that most members of Congress had with these big tech companies prior to that?
So these companies were the darlings of both parties for so many years for different reasons. On the right, they were the manifestation of the wisdom of free markets, right?
Mhm.
The tech
Well, and
industry.
they also spread money around too,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, we'll get to that. But if you look at the economy and your philosophy is right, less regulation equals more innovation, more prosperity. Tech is the least regulated, still is, right? The least regulated sector of the economy, right? All these other industries, railroads, telephone network, energy, they deal with a regulator that's all up in their business all the time. Housing, construction. This industry was pretty hands off. It's software, right? You can't see it, and it was very successful and it grew very quickly. And I think a lot of Republicans looked at that and said, see, like this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to make the whole economy operate like this. This is the wisdom of free markets and less regulation. On the left, there was certainly like a cool kids factor of these companies were all based in deep blue California. And they also championed a lot of social causes that the Democrats cared about. So the companies had left-leaning views on social issues, on immigration, et cetera, and they were innovative and they were the upstarts, they were the disruptors, right? They were, if you're on the left at that time, you look at big banks and big oil and you hate those legacy kind of incumbent industries. So you want to support the industry that is going to overtake them in the stock market and be the cool, fun upstart. And then, of course, both parties soured on the companies again for different reasons, right? On the right, a lot of it was about the censorship and kind of coming to realize that it was maybe bad for their priorities if you had really powerful companies supporting your your opposition in politics. And then on the left, it was the Cambridge Analytica scandal in 2016, this perception that the companies weren't doing enough to police conservative misinformation, right? A lot of folks blamed Facebook for Trump getting elected because they didn't
Mhm.
stop Russian bots from posting on groups.
People forget about that.
Yeah.
People forget about the Cambridge Analytica. I used to do that was actually initially how I got into working in politics was I was doing Facebook advertising for real estate and then ended up doing a bunch of political stuff along those lines. But the thing that was crazy about the real estate side is Facebook allowed you to target by a lot of things that were totally illegal, like violated the Fair Housing Act. Like it was like
Yeah.
credit score, amount in liquid assets, like all of that stuff, which again, by the way, to reiterate, illegal to do. Like you cannot do that. You could totally do it on Facebook back at the time. People forget about like I remember back at the time in 2017, people were calling Brad Parscale a hero, right? Like Brad Parscale was what won Trump the election. And I feel like people have totally memory hold that folks talk that way.
It was,
Time.
and what it really amounted to, I think, when the investigations all happened, if I remember correctly, Russia spent maybe several $100,000 on Facebook ads, right? In a digital advertising market that's worth what 100 billion in the
Yeah.
United States. So that was the argument that a handful of ads, right, spread across the entire country over, the election cycle takes a year and a half, 2 years, that flipped it. And I think that's obviously not the case. I
Yeah.
think people vote not just based on what one random like cyberbot says on the internet, but that was part of the reason why the reputation of Silicon Valley cratered on the left
Hmm.
was this perception that they were asleep at the switch and they should have been policing the platform in a way that, in their view, would have changed the election outcome.
Yeah. Um, how do a lot of these companies spread their money around in DC in
Uh,
both parties?
yeah, I mean, it's kind of your classics. Lots of lobbying firms. There was a report recently that Google found a creative way to not be the top lobbying company by just doing some of it through its subsidiary.
Mm,
So I don't have my notes in front of me. You said I'd look smarter if I didn't have notes, but
yeah.
it's that's one that viewers or listeners can find.
Yeah.
Just Google's creative accounting, because they were coming in lower than they should given the scale of the operation. But it's the classic. It's the lobbying, right? It's academic research. There was a recent ruling in the FTC's case against Amazon, an antitrust case, that we're now going to learn how many of their economists and experts are paid by them.
Hmm.
So we'll find out if any of that expertise is maybe biased a certain way based on having a contract with Amazon. But it's academia, it's think tanks, it's events, it's sponsorships, it's PACs. I mean, it's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And
They donate a lot, or at least did. I'm not as read into it now, but back in the day, they did donate a lot to a lot of Republicans in leadership.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's and look, every industry does it. The difference is tech has just more money than any industry in the history of the world by a huge magnitude. It's
Yeah.
just there's nothing. It's hard to even come close to it. I was talking to someone the other day, and I was like, maybe like Standard Oil or the Dutch East India Company are like the only companies you can think of in history that have some of the same scale and money and power. I mean, it's really hard to think of any corporations throughout history that are on this level in
Hmm.
terms of the money and the influence. Yeah.
Yeah. You get a lot of people now, when talking about particularly a lot of this antitrust stuff, which we'll get to in a minute, they really kind of harken back to what the GOP was like under TR. And I think that raises an interesting question, which is how are these tech companies similar to and different from a lot of the big trusts back in the day?
Yeah, I would say one difference is information, right? Those big trusts back in the day, they were powerful and their effects were very, I don't want to say necessarily very obvious, but they were more obvious, right? If one company owns all the railroads and then starts hiking prices, it's clear, okay, we have a problem here. And then you get a whole antitrust movement and the populace, et cetera. Like there was a kind of an easy way to figure out that there was a market failure there because prices went up.
Hmm.
um, it's harder with technology. Some of the effects are invisible, but the other difference is that these companies control information in a way that the railroads had a role in that, but not to the same extent. So when you look at how the internet has consolidated over time, right, you have a couple dominant players in social media, right, like YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. You have cloud services, which every company now relies on, right? A lot of companies don't put their servers in the basement anymore. They're doing it on the cloud. Who are the dominant players? Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud. And then everyone else is fighting for scraps in the market. AI is already looking like it's becoming consolidated, where there are a lot of scrappy upstarts, but they all are dependent on larger companies for investments and for cloud computing. So when you see a hot startup in AI, but it has a really close relationship with Google, is it really independent? And that's
Hmm.
something that antitrust agencies are looking at as well. So that's one of the key differences is just information flows. I don't think any monopolies of the past had the same grip on information that these companies do.
Yeah. So, what is the sort of argument for, moving now to talk about antitrust, how we would break a lot of these big tech companies up?
So when conservatives started kind of realizing that there was this threat to free speech, The next question is, well, how is it possible that companies that serve the entire United States, right, a very diverse country and diverse in terms of political viewpoint, right? Like
Mhm.
at least let's say half your customers are right or lean right, and the other half are left or lean left. How is it possible that you could do something, make a decision that just seems so obviously against half of your customers? And the answer in many ways is because there's not a viable option, right? There's no viable competitor. If there were, 10 companies vying for your market share, maybe one of them would say, we're not going to shadow ban. We're not going to do weird stuff with content moderation because we don't want to piss off our customers. Or someone would take advantage of the opportunity of having an entire political group really mad at
Mhm.
companies for, but if it's not a competitive market, that switching is more difficult or it doesn't happen. So I think there's a direct relationship that conservatives started to see between the immediate impact they're seeing in their day-to-day life, which is the impact on information flows, and then monopoly power. And the two are directly related. Now, in terms of whether and how to break companies up, I think it's really case specific. I think what the DOJ under this administration has proposed in the Google case makes a lot of sense, right? If the
Can
reason,
you walk us through that?
yes, yeah. So the Google case, they were ruled that they have a search monopoly. They have a monopoly in the search market, right? Google.com, everyone's familiar. And the way they maintain that monopoly was by paying cell phone manufacturers and like wireless carriers to make it the default so that instead of getting to choose what search engine you would have, every phone would just come pre-booked with Google basically, and that helped them maintain an illegal monopoly. So what the DOJ has said is Google Chrome browser, which I'm sure most of your viewers are using, they need to sell that. It remains to be seen whether a judge will agree with that remedy. But the reason they're recommending that is because what the DOJ is arguing is that this control of this web browser, the most popular web browser in the United States, is feeding the monopoly. It's because they have too many points of control. You have control over search, then you have control over the gateway to the internet, and that is perpetuating the illegal monopoly. So that's a case where it's not saying strip Google completely and sell it for parts, right? We're not going to destroy the company. It's just you have to divest this asset that is perpetuating illegal behavior.
Yeah. So, what exactly would that look like in terms of like they have to sell it to a totally disinterested third party, or like how exactly would this actually pan out? Like, would it still be called Google Chrome? Would it end up being called something else?
It's interesting. You've seen some companies express, an interest in buying it. You've seen OpenAI express an interest, which they would presumably want to use it to promote ChatGPT. You've seen Perplexity, which is a smaller AI startup that's trying to do like an AI search engine. They're interested in buying it. So I think there's clearly interest. The judge, of course, would have to approve of whatever ends up happening. And I'm not an antitrust lawyer, but I think whatever the divestiture is, it needs to make sure to remedy the underlying anti-competitive conduct, right? So one issue would be like if Google tried to start some fake company and then buy buy Chrome and then
Yeah, that's what I
have a
assume they
licensing
would
deal,
do.
right? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be not okay. So it
Interesting.
remains. So the remedies trial has happened, right? This is a trial after you've already lost in antitrust. Then you have to argue about what the remedy should be, rather. So we'll see if the judge ends up signing off on what the Department of Justice has asked for, and then we'll see how it affects the internet. From here on, right? If it's successful, we could see more competition and more companies sprouting up to take on Google.
Are there any other really interesting antitrust cases like this working their way through right now?
So there's several. You have Meta, which is the FTC is asking that Meta divest WhatsApp and Instagram, these
Mhm.
acquisitions from years ago. You also have Amazon is in litigation with the FTC over the way that it treats third-party sellers on the platform, essentially raising their prices and telling them they're not allowed to sell something for less money on a competitor's website. Apple is in litigation as well for its behavior in its app store. So there's litigation is one avenue, but then there's also legislation. And getting back to the censorship issue, one of the big aha moments for conservatives was when Parler was just kicked off the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. Google and Apple control the software for over 99% of smartphones in the United States, right? Like all these other things have gone out of business or are on life support. There was a Windows phone for a while.
Yeah.
Facebook tried to make
I had
a phone.
one.
Amazon tried to make a phone, right? And this market's just really locked in. So even well-heeled trillion-dollar competitors couldn't break into this market. Google and Apple own this market. And so when they both decided Parler's gone, the app sputtered. I mean, you can't succeed in this economy if you don't have a mobile app and you're a social media app.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like relying on people to go on their desktop to parler.com after they've been kicked off the app store is just not viable. So that was kind of the awakening. And the question is, well, how can they do that, right? How can they both just make this choice? It's because there's no app store competition, right? You can't go to a different app store. There's no American Moment app store that says we're going to host, Parler, maybe we're going to host this podcast and maybe we'll let you download this stack of books right here, right?
Yeah.
Like, and just have a curated experience that you all believe in and matches your values, right? The only two options are Apple's experience and Google's experience. And if they have similar terms of service, if they do similar things, the duopoly is not much better than a monopoly. So one piece of legislation that would help guard against this would be the Open App Markets Act. This is sponsored by Marsha Blackburn, who does a lot on tech issues and antitrust, and it's co-sponsored by Mike Lee, also has Democrat support, Blumenthal, Klobuchar, and it would require that Google and Apple open up their environments to competition, so that in the future, if they were to say we're deleting every conservative app, there would be alternative app stores and alternative means of downloading those apps on your phones. So the impact would be less.
So what does this actually look like in practice? Like you can download another third-party app store from which you'd be able to download apps like this?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If this were to come to fruition, we're seeing what this could look like overseas, as some overseas regulators have pursued this, but nothing would be as strong or as clear cut as this
Yeah.
legislation. I think the United States, as the birthplace of all these industries and innovative apps, like we should be the ones to set the standard of what reasonable competition regulation looks like.
How much do all these companies hate Gail Slater, who is, by the way, an America First patriot?
I don't know that they hate her. She's been in the tech policy world for quite a while. She has a great reputation on, left, right, and center, and has worked in different roles.
But there's no denying she's making their lives very hard.
She is. Yeah. I think, they would rather have someone in there who is much more in the mold of the antitrust regulators from the George W. Bush administration, from the Obama administration, from
I'm sure they would like
Reagan
that.
administration. Yeah. So I think, and they're trying to convince everyone that if we do anything on antitrust, or if we regulate for children's safety, or basically anything that you do that is not what we want, then China wins, right?
Yeah.
And then China wins the race to AI. That's like the classic argument these days is whatever anyone is proposing that is adverse to these tech companies is a gift to China. So, Nick, let's say you don't think, maybe you're like me and you don't think that children should be talking to chatbots, that's just inappropriate. You've already seen a child commit suicide. You've seen children's mental health be impacted by this. These are very powerful tools, unregulated. And maybe we should just say kids shouldn't be on these things. So we need to either verify their age or just require that companies not provide these products to children. You might hear advocates in DC say, well, China is racing ahead on AI. And if you slow us down at all, right, they're going to win.
Yeah. We will not achieve the singularity. By the way, I do not desire the singularity, period.
Yeah, I think, and just going back, this is one of the things I've been talking to a couple of people about recently. So if you turn back the clock about, 10 years, there were members of Congress that were worried about social media's impact on mental health, on the discourse, whatever, any manner.
Turns out they were right about that.
Any manner of social ills.
Yeah.
Now, China wasn't the same boogeyman it was back then. Like it was still a threat, but we've really come a long way in terms of how the United States views China. Back then it was still like trade is good and they'll liberalize. Spoiler alert, that did not happen. And now they're threatening everyone in their neighborhood. But if you look back then, it wasn't that national security, right? Because people weren't really arguing, well, you can't regulate the Facebook news feed because national security. What you saw was economic competitiveness, right? If you turn back the clock 10 years, any regulation you wanted to do, you wanted to change Section 230, which is their liability shield, which is how they never get sued for anything that goes on their platforms, right? Anything you wanted to do, they would say, this will hurt the United States economically. It'll make us less competitive around the world. And that was a very compelling argument because no one wants to, kneecap the American tech industry. If you were to go back, if you now go to a lot of the lawmakers who maybe bought that argument then and say, if you could go back in time and regulate social media, would you? A lot of them might say, well, yeah, of course I would. Now I know so much more. But we're seeing this exact same thing happen with AI again now, right? So we're seeing the same argument and just replace economic competitiveness with, if you do anything to slow this down or to put a guardrail in place, China wins.
Yeah.
So my two separate issues, and there are maybe some nuances that need to be worked out. But my message would just be, if you regret not doing anything about social media, and now the same companies are telling you, you can't touch us again, no antitrust, no privacy regulation, no kids safety, because we're in this existential crisis with China, shouldn't you then say, well, wait, I was fooled the last time, so maybe I need to approach this one differently.
Yeah. I mean, that argument is just, it is so shocking to me. Like, doing age verification where kids can't talk to chatbots is a national security crisis. Like, you just say that sentence out loud and you sound like a crazy person.
Well, it stifles innovation.
Yeah.
Everything
Stifles innovation that, this chatbot can't talk about sex with my kids or like tell my kid to kill himself or whatever.
This was how my views ended up changing on tech, is really because the mantra, right, on the libertarian tech community is like stifle innovation. And of course, regulation can stifle innovation. Of course it can. Right. But if you ask the question, well, like, what specifically is the innovation that is being stifled, then you start to think, well, if this is just an abstract argument that any involvement of regulation or anything antitrust enforcement stifles innovation, you're going to have to be more specific.
Mm-hmm.
Because if your argument is that it's very innovative, that you're getting kids like addicted to chatbots, I think that's an innovation that people would be okay stifling.
Yeah.
Right.
We'd be okay without that.
And
be fine.
Other things, right? In the antitrust contest, Apple and Google take 30% of every transaction in their stores. That's multiples of any credit card fee in the country, right? It's just an crazy price gouging that is going on because they have this gatekeeper power. Is that innovative, right? Is that an innovation we need to preserve, that you could just price gouge people in your app store, right? So I think that's the key, is let's start asking.
It sounds like usury.
What are we stifling? Exactly.
Yeah.
The China argument cracks me up because a couple of weeks ago, Punchbowl's DC rag, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say rag, DC industry trade publication that covers politics in DC, for anyone unfamiliar. They reported on dinners that Microsoft and Meta were holding in DC with a bunch of think tanks. And the theme of the dinner was, you have to let us use copyrighted material without paying for it. Otherwise, China will beat us on AI, right? It's a complicated issue, intellectual property. We don't have to get into a whole thing. I know you talked about it with Jack Posobiec a little bit on the show. But at the same time that they're holding these dinners saying, like, we are the companies that are going to beat China, right? Like, the US government needs to support us. It was revealed that Microsoft was using engineers in China to maintain Defense Department systems and several other agencies. Then it was revealed that just today, as the day we're recording, they did not disclose that to the Defense Department.
Awesome.
Right? So the DOD had no idea, right? Microsoft said, of course they knew we were doing that. I'm like, I'm pretty sure they didn't, if you look at the statements from Hegseth and Tom Cotton that have come out after that. So the national champion, right? We got to let this company do whatever it wants because we're going to beat China, is creating cybersecurity vulnerabilities that are allowing the Chinese to hack us.
But also, that's like, again, it's another one of those insane arguments where it's like, if you don't let me have the Goonies, then China will kill us. It's like, what? Like, when you actually say what they're saying out loud, it does not make any sense.
No.
It's just absolutely bonkers. How do you think the numbers have changed on the Hill in terms of members that like are much more concerned about big tech than they used to be?
Oh, it's been a huge shift.
I mean, I remember when it was like 4 guys, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I think I would say a majority in both parties and both chambers are concerned. The gap is turning that concern into action. And I think what we've seen is big tech has had a lot of success in using bad faith arguments to tank legislation.
mhm.
So on children's safety, right? Conservatives care about censorship. They don't want conservatives to get censored. So they'll say if you pass the Kids Online Safety Act, conservatives will be censored. Which and then on the left, the companies will go to the left and say, if you pass this, we won't be able to censor. So one of my favorite examples in DC is how left-leaning tech advocates and right-leaning tech advocates were somehow successful in making arguments that were mutually exclusive to their respective sides of the aisle. And I wanted to be like, do you guys not talk to each other ever?
Yeah.
Like one side is saying, you can't pass the Open App Markets Act because then we won't be able to kick Parler off the store. Right. And the other side is saying, well, if you pass this, like it'll lead to more conservative censorship. I'm very confused how these two things,
Can be true at the same time.
they can't be, but it
Yeah.
worked. I mean, maybe not direct cause and effect, but the bill didn't pass, right? Kids Online Safety Act has been held up. So,
Yeah, again, the
yeah,
the kids one drives me nuts
yeah.
because it, it's just such an insane argument. Like, if you protect kids, naturally, national security will be harmed. Just- how can you say that out loud with a straight face, man? Like,
Well, that's why
maybe a couple $1 million helps. I don't know.
maybe that was
Like,
why it was a private dinner.
yeah, that makes sense. I'm wondering about, I'm thinking about some of these, like thinking about the Freedom Caucus in particular as an example, who a lot of their members were, I think, initially opposed to a lot of this action on big tech. Not all of them, but a fair few. And then I think you're right about like the Parler thing, the president getting kicked off of Twitter, uh, et cetera. They've, to their credit, like really become proactive, I think, on a lot of these issues. But I think the interesting distinction here is there are the people who are that care a lot about this big tech issue because they're reacting to something that just happened versus people who actually hold this ideological view on antitrust. And I'm wondering if you could tease out like sort of the differences in desired outcomes for those two crowds and who fits in which bucket.
Yeah, I think there are certainly members of Congress whose primary concern was anti-conservative censorship.
Mhm.
And
Which is a worthwhile cause.
absolutely. And after Trump returned to office for his second term, the companies did a lot to try to address that concern, right? Some of it still falls short, but Meta has made significant changes, right? They stopped using biased news outlets to fact check people's posts and then like taking things off based on what a news outlet says is true or false. And that's a huge change, right? From years before. Google's made some changes as well, right? Books that were banned from Amazon returned to Amazon. What I would say to the members who think that this problem has been solved is, do you think they've made those changes because they've decided deep down that there's a legitimate free speech concern, or is
Yeah.
it because Trump is in office?
Yeah.
Because when Biden was in office, they were working with the administration to censor posts, as the investigation from now Senator Eric Schmidt, then Attorney General of Missouri, showed. Right, the Supreme Court didn't rule the way he wanted, but in the discovery of these cases, it was pretty clear that the administration was badgering companies. The Biden administration was badgering companies into censoring posts. So, if you think you've won, we'll see. We'll see in a few years, right? If there's a different president, or maybe further down the line, if the behavior just returns, right? Because these companies now have a track record of just trying to appease whoever is sitting in the Oval Office.
Yeah. I'm very interested, in not just because it's also my view, but because I think it's also a much more sophisticated view, is sort of making the conservative case for antitrust enforcement more broadly. Again, like Gail Slater is a great example of this. Um, can you kind of walk us through how you can make that case as a conservative for not just big tech, but for all of like public American life?
Yeah, no one does that better than FTC Commissioner Mark Meadow, FTC Chairman
I
Andrew Ferguson, and
totally agree.
AAG Gail Slater. They have all spoken to how antitrust fits at the very root of conservatism. This is
But
not
we're
like
gonna take the poor man's
yes, exactly.
interpretation
Yes,
right here.
yes. I think look, let's get back to innovation, right? If
Yeah.
we as a side of the aisle do want to be pro innovation, right? We want to see new products and services emerge on the market. I think what there was the disconnect for many years was that whatever big tech says they want is what's going to lead to the most innovation. And it took us a while to realize that that's not the case. We've seen examples of Apple saying, wow, that's a really cool idea that you came up with. App is called Tile, right? It was a app that was just like basically, if I'm remembering this correctly, it was like AirTag, right? Like
Yeah.
they invented the AirTag. Apple said, we think this is a security risk, so we're just going to kick you off our store, and then we'll come out with the AirTag, and then that's going to be the only thing that works with our phone.
Yeah.
Is that innovative? No, you just killed a company.
Which does that company not exist anymore?
I think they exist, but probably a shell of themselves.
Oh my God.
I would have to look it up. Amazon, right? If you're selling something, you're a small business owner, you're selling something on the Amazon platform, you're a US based seller. And they go, wow, knowing what we now know, because we can look behind the scenes and see all sorts of data that you don't have access to as a mom and pop shop, we've realized your product is pretty popular. Rather than help you cultivate that and we all rise together, we're going to take your idea, make it in China.
We're gonna make an Amazon Basics
Correct.
version.
And then you go out of business, right? And I'm just
Mhm.
from a populist perspective, is that an ideal outcome? No, like you want people, individuals to be able to succeed, not just one company or 5 companies. So I think there is a direct connection between the lack of competition and some of the priorities that the populist movement has, right? The ability of just average people to start a business, to succeed. You cannot succeed today if Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, a couple other companies maybe decide they just want to shut you down.
Yeah.
And that is an antitrust problem.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily need to be solved by breaking everything up and like scrapping companies and selling them at auction, but some targeted enforcement here and there, some targeted legislation here and there, right? Saying that you can't just use cybersecurity as a pretext to engage in anti-competitive conduct. That would be a really good start, because then anyone out there in the country, wherever you are, that thinks you have a good idea and wants to try to succeed, you can do it. I mean, Y Combinator is a startup incubator based in San Francisco. The head of it has testified many times before Congress. He said he would not invest in companies whose business model would be a challenge to the big tech guys. He just wouldn't do it. He would say, I love your business. This is brilliant. In a better world, this would succeed, but I'm not going to do it because I'm not going to throw money at something knowing that they're going to shut you down.
Yeah.
That's not innovative. That's not a healthy economy. That's not free market, right? That's monopoly.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree with that. How important do you think was Elon Musk buying Twitter?
I think it has good
Twitter is not a monopoly, obviously,
Right.
in the same sense that a lot of these other companies are. But
I think it's had good and bad effects. I think the good effect was that there was this platform that was no longer, I mean, Twitter was one of the worst offenders in terms of the censorship and
Totally.
the labeling and what,
Yep.
like arguably worse than any of them under its prior leadership. And I would put that more on the people running the company than Jack Dorsey himself.
Yep.
It was obviously a positive that you had this platform that was immune from those pressures and information could flow freely. I think the downside of that is that many conservatives thought that like problem solved, right? Like everything's
Our work
over.
here is done.
And to be honest, like Elon has come under fire for some of his management of Twitter, and there are instances where it looks like he wakes up angry at somebody and throttles
Just nukes them.
their account, right?
Yeah.
So again, the answer, what I would say to the left, right? I would go to the left and say, you know how you were totally fine with all these companies having this level of control when you agreed with their CEOs, but now you're mad that Elon's in charge of X. Instead of just leaving the platform and going to Blue Sky, how about joining the the movement to try to address these issues in a more comprehensive way? I think it is totally legitimate for people on the left to be concerned that Elon can just nuke accounts based on how he feels on a given day. I think that's why we need anti-discrimination rules in this country for people using technology. I think that like basic consumer protections, you should be able to appeal when your account is suspended. The company should be required to explain why it was suspended at a minimum. Like, let's get some transparency, then we can figure out something maybe more robust. But yeah, I think the downside of Elon owning Twitter is just that many conservatives think problem solved.
Yeah. Do you think that with now having X and XAI, and he's been talking a lot about like bringing Vine back do you start to get worried that like X will also be one of these, offenders engaging in anti-competitive behavior?
I would broaden it beyond them and suggest that when it's a chatbot, it's very difficult to know how anything's working, right? So the benefit of social media censorship was that it was so obvious and out in the open. Like, yeah, there was shadow banning, but people kind of knew it was happening. They could talk about it. You could see accounts get taken down. You don't know how a chatbot behaves. You and I don't know why it's saying the things that it's saying and what the, especially if it's a closed source model. And even if it's an open weight model, you need to be like an AI expert to really understand how any of
I don't know anything.
Yeah,
about
right,
any of
exactly. Like that you would need a very, very advanced sophistication to understand how even the open source models are behaving and why they say something is true or false, what news sources they rely on. My concern is that now that it's behind this wall, right? Like you can't just see an account get suspended. You're talking to an artificial intelligence that has a bias and you don't even know why or what bias it is. I think that raises the concern. And again, I don't think the government should go in and like micromanage how chatbots work necessarily. I don't know if that's a good idea, but transparency, right? Like, is there something we can do so that advocates like at your organization or otherwhere have the tools they need to be able to see which companies are transparent and unbiased in how they develop their AI or which ones are trying to push an agenda through their AI.
Right.
It also underscores the need for competition again, right? Like one of the solutions to this problem is having a lot of different AI companies so that, Grok obviously behaves differently than some of the other AI companies. And like, that's good, but I don't think we should always just rely on Elon companies to solve everything.
Totally.
And I think it's important to have a competitive ecosystem. And if all these companies are just beholden to whatever Microsoft thinks or whatever Google and Amazon think, the risk of monopoly just kind of playing itself out again in AI goes up.
Yeah.
So I think that is something for both sides of the aisle to be vigilant on. Is it's going to be harder in some ways to detect anti-competitive and anti-free speech behavior because it's a bot and it's not just a news feed.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the national security implications of AI?
So I definitely agree with the companies that, and of course the administration, that AI is a national imperative, right? We should want to lead the world. It's an important technology. My skepticism is that large language models as they are today have such a close relationship with national security. So, when a company says, well, I need to just kind of take all the podcasts that Nick ever hosted and feed them into my model, and if you don't let me do that, our national security is threatened. Like, how exactly? Like, how exactly is the written works of authors and foxnews.com helping you make an autonomous weapon for the DoD? I'm a little confused on that. Maybe I'm just a simpleton.
Yeah.
But I think they want this general vibe out there that just like all of this is national security, and we don't have to get specific about how any of our products relate to national security.
Right.
So yes, obviously think it's important, but I think what's really going to be important for national security are AI applications that are actually specific to a national security objective and not just a general purpose chatbot.
Right.
What's going to help our national security is an AI that is designed to analyze satellite imagery and, find out, did the Chinese move a tank group somewhere,
Yeah.
right?
My Hellfire missile doesn't need to say my wife like Borat.
Right, right.
Like, again,
Yeah. Some of
these arguments are just so like,
yeah. So I think we need to be, and just at a base level, national security being used as an excuse for bad policy choices is very old.
Yeah.
Right? This is not a new phenomenon. We have decided many times in the past as a nation not to just ignore our own laws and values because someone says national security is threatened. Gail Slater, in this very room, I interviewed her for my show, and she said the same arguments were made about the AT&T Bell monopoly. You can't break us up because we're helping the DoD. We broke them up, unleashed massive amounts of innovation. IBM faced an antitrust case, massive innovation. Microsoft, right, faced an antitrust investigation, led to the rise of Google and other competitors that would have never been able to make it. So be very skeptical when someone who looks like a monopolist, smells like a monopolist, has been ruled to be a monopoly by a judge, says you can't touch me because national security, especially when those companies are doing the bidding of China, like Microsoft, Apple, et cetera. If these are national champions, they should at least be national and not helping our adversary.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to leave it. It was a really great conversation. Thanks so much for coming on Moment of Truth.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for another fantastic episode of Moment of Truth, and thanks to Evan for making some time out of his busy schedule to come on this show. Once again, if you want to hear more of Evan talking, which I always really enjoy, you can make sure to check out the Dynamist podcast. He also is at the Foundation for American Innovation. They do a lot of great work over there, so make sure to go and check them out. If you want to know more about what we're doing here at American Moment, maybe this is your first time listening to the podcast, you can go to americanmoment.org. We've got applications for all 4 of our academic programs up there, so you can make sure to check those out. Thank you, and we'll see you again next week. Moment of Truth is an American Moment podcast taped at the Conservative Partnership Campus Studios and is produced by Jake Mercier and Hunter Smith, with original graphics and title cards by Jared Cummings. Our intro song is A Minor Struggle by Ryan Serenich, and our website is americanmoment.org.